Does to Smith. Jabari for three and the win. Yeah! He got it!
Here by Sabonis on the steal and the take, but Alperen Sengun seemingly suffering a lower leg injury on this play as he went up to contest the shot. Watch his right knee.
Oh.
And he was holding it, writhing in pain. In one center. Splendid play here by Sabonis on the steal and the take, but Alperen Sengun seemingly.
We are here to Fuel Rockets News. This is the Rockets Fuel podcast. Of course, I'm your host, LaShawn Binkley. You can always find me on Twitter, X, at Binkley Hoops, or my written work over at the Dream Shake or SB Nation. And the article that I'm be referring to today is actually over at the Dream Shake right now. So definitely go over and check that out after you watch the video. But on today's show, unfortunately, we're not going to be talking about the Houston Rockets' big win over the Sacramento Kings, where they actually won their third straight road game. Usually that would be the big story for the Houston Rockets, considering they've been one of the worst road teams all season long. And they beat a really good Sacramento Kings team after trailing in the first half and pretty much dominating in the second half to be able to pull away at the end and come away with that victory. But we all know now that the big news from last night's game was the Alperen Sengun injury, where in typical Sengun fashion, most players would have probably not even ran back on that play, especially with the team up 8 at the time. But Sengun, being Sengun, hustled down the court, trying to get the block after a Fred VanVleet turnover, and unfortunately came down really awkwardly on his leg. His ankle twisted the complete opposite way. He hyperextended his leg, and he was writhing on the court. You can hear him on the camera mics. You can hear him saying that he really messed up his knee, he really messed up his ankle. You can hear the screams when he came down. So it was definitely a serious situation. He was not able to get up. They had to bring in the wheelchair to take him off the court, something you never want to see with anybody, any professional athlete, any athlete, because that's usually when it's pretty serious. And we pretty much had to wait for the results. Last night, Ime Udoka stated that they already did the x-rays and that they will be flying back to Houston to get the MRI today, which is Monday. We didn't get them earlier in the day, but we finally got it towards the end of the day. And we got the Adrian Wojnarowski report stating that he does have a severe ankle sprain. Luckily, it wasn't anything beyond that as far as any type of ACL or PCL tear. So considering how bad it looked, this was the best case scenario when it came to what type of injury he could have had. He could have had a type of injury where he was out for a year plus. We've seen it multiple times. We saw it with the Paul George injury going all the way back when he was playing for USA Basketball, how devastating that injury and how long it took him to come back from that. So yes, you don't want him to be hurt. Yes, you were hoping that maybe it wasn't even anything as serious as even a severe ankle sprain, but considering what it could have been, this was probably the best case scenario. And just because, I'm not a doctor, I wanted to get the opinion of an actual doctor. So I actually spoke with Dr. Jesse Morse. He is a sports medicine expert out of Miami, Florida. I want to get his opinion since he deals with this type of thing every single day. He also sent out some very interesting informative tweets that kind of helped me along the line when I was writing out the article. I wanted to ask him some questions and actually get an expert's opinion on what Alperen Sengun can expect before the recovery, what type of injury he had, and also during his recovery time, and once he comes back, if he's going to have any type of limited mobility or if there's any possibility of further injury down the line. So I definitely wanted to talk to him about that, and he definitely gave me some interesting answers when it came to that. Of course, I started off with asking what type of injury it was. He said that he suffered a left knee sprain and bone bruise and a left lateral ankle sprain, and that they have not classified the severity of the ankle injury at this time, but based on their initial comments, both sound mild to slightly moderate severity. Like I said, this was the best case scenario because it could have been a lot worse. And as you'll hear in this article, when I was talking to him, he mentioned that the fact that Sengun's age and the fact that we know how flexible he is, that definitely played a part in him actually coming out a lot better than it could have been. I also wanted to ask him, like I was speaking about earlier, what was the best case scenario considering how his leg and ankle bent. And he said, just like I said, that this was the best case scenario, that it could have been much worse. We could have been looking at a lot longer recovery time. And that I also asked him, like, okay, so since it's a best case scenario, how much longer could he possibly be out? And he said it's kind of hard to tell, but it could be anywhere from a few weeks, depending on how. It's really more about the ankle than the knee. With the knee, is more about how he can tolerate pain, or if he how much pain he can tolerate. The ankle, of course, is the big issue because that was the most severe of the two injuries, was his ankle injury. And he was saying, that's kind of the bigger concern right now. And, even if the ankle is able to heal, we got to remember we're towards the end of the season. I don't know if the Rockets really even want to risk it. If somehow he's magically able to come back in a 2 to 4 week period, I mean, there's only a handful of games even left in the season. And yes, the Rockets do have a small outside chance of possibly making a play-in game with the Golden State Warriors struggling. The Lakers actually lost the other night, even though they were able to pull out a win against Minnesota. But Golden State has been struggling without Steph Curry. We don't know how long he's going to be out. So the Rockets still have a outside chance of getting in a play-in, but it would take a minor miracle with them being 5 games back to try to make up that time in like pretty much less than a month now before the end of the season. So the Rockets, of course, going to have to factor that in if they're talking about, well, in best case scenario, maybe he'll make it back by the end of the season. But do you really want him to come back and possibly injure that same leg again? Because to me, it's going to take a lot more recovery time, and it's also a mental thing. You got to think about it. It's not just, hey, physically he's okay. You got to think about next time he jumps up, is he thinking about it? Is he putting more weight on the other leg to kind of compensate for the leg that got injured? And then that's when you might possibly injure that leg as well, the other leg as well. So the Rockets are going to have to consider all that when they're talking about possibly even bringing him back this season. I don't think he's coming back this season. I think it's pretty much the end of his season, unfortunately, his end of his great breakout season. But of course, we still have to wait and see after, things start to settle down a little bit. Because that's another question I asked him. Well, will he possibly need surgery? And since the knee is pretty much more of a bruise and the ankle is a ankle sprain, that's something that can heal over time and with rest. He won't necessarily even probably need surgery. But if they do want to kind of speed along the process and also probably fortify his knee and his ankle more going forward so that he doesn't have any issues when he does come back. The doctor did mention that they could also reinforce it with regenerative medicine, a PRP stem cell, where basically they inject the stem cells, into your leg, and it'll help fortify that leg going forward. That's something that the Rockets can consider if they kind of want to speed up the process, because people like Steph Curry have that type of procedure done in the past, and some other NBA players, I'm sure a lot of other athletes have had this as well, because it kind of helped speed up that process of healing and recovery. I also wanted to ask them if there would be any possible injuries in the future that could be from this, or will he be able to heal close to 100% and not necessarily have to worry about, maybe causing another injury to another part of his leg. And then he said, in general, I'm not overly concerned about either injury. His age definitely contributed to his good diagnosis, along with its flexibility. Unfortunately, the body only heals to about 85% naturally, and the body will use scar tissue to try and help strengthen those tissues and ligaments. Now, of course, with scar tissue, you can see on the outside with the scar tissue, but also with scar tissue, it could be an issue on the actual inner part of your leg, to where you don't want to leave scar tissue over, hanging around too long inside of your leg, because that can cause issues in the future, and that can also limit your mobility. But that's something they're going to have to work on when it comes to physical therapy, and possibly what I talked about earlier with the different procedures that they can do to kind of help speed up that process. So that's definitely something else to keep in mind. And then I also asked him about, with that type of injury, if he had any more thoughts. And this is kind of how he ended the article. He said that this could have been a devastating injury for Sengun, one that could have potentially changed his future dramatically. Thankfully, within 6 to 12 months, this will be completely forgotten. It was a fluke injury that was relatively unpreventable. And he also, of course, said he's happy that such a talented player was able to avoid significant injury and should be able to return to the court after a brief absence, which is definitely good to hear. Because I mean, I think pretty much anybody watching last night, even if you weren't a doctor, you were thinking like the worst because it looked so bad when he came down on his, because your leg is not, of course, supposed to, your leg angle is not supposed to bend like that. So to hear the news now that he should be okay, with time, with recovery, and with some maybe some possible procedure, and of course with physical therapy. That's definitely the best case scenario, and I think Rockets fans should be happy with that because I mean I know that that definitely was a downer for even with a big win last night. Pretty much all everybody was talking about was the injury to Sengun because of course Sengun is the Rockets' best player, and just me talking to him throughout the last couple of seasons. He is one of the nicest people you're going to ever talk to. Definitely one of the best interviews out of anybody on the team. So it was definitely, even for, somebody supposed to be a journalist, supposed to be kind of in the middle and not necessarily be a fan and cheering when you're at the games. You definitely don't want to see anybody get hurt, but especially somebody like Sengun, who always has a kind word for the media, even when the Rockets lose. Even when he doesn't necessarily have a great game, he's still willing to talk and come and always says hello, and he always answers every single question. So you definitely, wish the best for Sengun, and you hope that he's able to come back better than ever in, a quick recovery. It's just a shame that this happened, especially with a game that was pretty much almost wrapped up and towards the end of the game under a minute left. But fortunately, sometimes you just can't prevent these type of things, and it's not really anybody's fault. It's just one of those things that happens when you're playing sports. And unfortunately, it happened to Sengun. And like I said, hopefully he'll be back soon. But just talking with the doctor, he definitely uh, was more optimistic about his time frame, him being able to come back here pretty soon. So that's something that, if you take anything from this video, is that it seemed like it's gonna work out for the best for Sengun, especially with his age and the fact that he is a flexible player. We've seen that, since he's been in the league, some of his pregame warm-up routines. So there's definitely some good news. And even with the injury to Sengun, not really going to go into how that affects on the court yet, because we really want to talk more about Sengun, because at the end of the day, he is a human being. He is a person that's going to have to deal with this. And he's somebody that, I know a lot of Rockets fans, around the world love, especially in Turkey. So definitely just want to talk about the off court part of it and his recovery part of it. And we have plenty of time to talk about later about what that means on the court. So that's going to do it for today's show. We always appreciate the support. Leave down in the comments if what do you think about the diagnosis? Are you feeling more optimistic than you were last night? Let us know what you think. If you have any questions, or if you have anything you want to say about it, please leave them down in the comments. We also always appreciate the support. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, because we're definitely going to continue to bring you great content throughout the year. We have several more games we'll be at this for this season. So we'll definitely have pre and post game for that. So again, appreciate the support, and make sure you check out the next episode of Rocky Fuel Podcast.